Hello and welcome back to another endgame video. Today we're going to be talking about a pretty niche but actually pretty important endgame. A queen versus almost a queen. And this is like kind of a weird endgame because like it's in every like endgame book and endgame study that I've ever seen, but it's not like one of those that it's like really popular like the Lucena position or Philidor position. It's not like one of those oh must know endgames, right? It's but it's still a pretty good one. And it's got some weird kind of intricacies to it that are pretty interesting. So this is from a bullet game I played, and my opponent did not play this as accurately as he could have, but I'll just show you. So the idea here is if you're the side with the queen, which I am, um, you need to get the king in front of the pawn, and then once the king is in front of the pawn and can't promote, you bring your king forward, and then you just repeat that process over and over. So check, he goes in front of the pawn. He didn't have to do that right away, but if he plays something like this, you just kind of slowly get closer till he has to go there. Um, and then here he goes in front of the pawn right away. Now the computer says this is a mistake, but he really could have delayed the inevitable with king to d3 here, or sorry, to d1, and then you have queen to b3, and then the king either moves out of the way this way and loses the pawn in the game instantly, or tries to hang on to the pawn right here and queen here. If king goes back, the pawn is gone, so the king has to move in front of the pawn. And now that you've got your desired setup, king moves up, right? So you just repeat that process over and over. Let's go back into the game. He just moved in front of the pawn early, so now my king moves up, goes over here, check. King's in front of the pawn, king moves up. Just gotta make sure you're not stalemating here by accident. King goes here. Um, check, king goes in front of the pawn, king moves up, king goes here, and now this is just kind of a mate sequence because now my king is close enough to cover these squares. And boom, checkmate, right? With 4.6 seconds left, I might add, in a 2-1 bullet game. So this is like a pretty, like, obviously if I didn't know that end game beforehand, I probably wouldn't have found this in the 15 seconds I had in this bullet game, even with the 1 second increment. So it is useful to know the technique, and my opponent didn't know the technique to try to like stall as much as possible. But that's the general idea. But you know what's really interesting about this end game is that if the pawn is on this square or on this square, it's a draw. If the pawn is, I actually don't 100% know about these two squares. I'm pretty sure that's a win for the side with the queen. But if this pawn is on any of these squares, it is a 100% win for the side with the queen. And you just do that same procedure I showed you. But you cannot do that with the pawn on the bishop files here because of stalemate. So let's take a look at it. This is almost the exact same position except the pawn is right here. Okay. So now it's white's turn. Um, so if the queen goes and checks and tries to move up, okay, we do the same thing. Now the king can go in front of the pawn, but that would just allow the white king to get closer, and then it would be a win for white. The king can actually go away from the pawn, and it doesn't matter if the queen takes it because this is stalemate, and that's a draw. And there's actually no way white can make progress from here. Okay, because if white tries to bring the king in, well, boom. I mean, this is just a free fork, right? And let's say the white's like, okay, I'm not gonna fall for the fork. I'm gonna bring the king in here and maybe go in this way. Well, still a queen comes in, and it's still unwinnable for white. I mean, you can check as much as you want, but but it's still a draw. So I just thought that was pretty interesting.